she was introduced to the world as the fiancée, the business manager, the blonde standing beside the genius. But anyone who actually paid attention knew Jolene MacIntyre was running far more than a schedule and a budget. She was running the entire operation, and without her, there is no bad Chad Customs, no discovery deal, no viral moment that put a small-town Nova Scotia car shop on the international map. For years, fans watched her manage chaos, absorb pressure, and quietly hold together a business that looked effortless on camera, but was anything but behind the scenes. And when the cameras finally stopped rolling, she didn't disappear. She started talking, confirming things viewers had long suspected about the show, about the deal they signed, and about what was really happening inside Hiltz Auto Co., while everyone else was focused on the cars. She's been engaged to Chad Hiltz since 2017. Still no wedding. The show hasn't aired a new episode since 2020. Still no season 3. But Jolene MacIntyre, now in her mid-30s, is still here, still building, still running the brand, and finally saying out loud what most fans already believed. This is her story. Most people who stumbled onto Bad Chad Customs weren't tuning in for the business manager. They were there for the wild builds, the junkyard finds, and the idea that a guy in rural Nova Scotia could turn scrap metal into something that stopped traffic at car shows across North America. Jolene MacIntyre was just part of the backdrop, or so it seemed. The reality is that Jolene's story starts long before Chad Hiltz, long before Green Goblin Customs, and long before any television camera ever pointed in her direction. She was born in 1989 in Centreville, Nova Scotia, a small agricultural community in Kings County, far removed from the kind of place that produces reality TV personalities. She grew up athletic, driven, and quietly ambitious in a way that wouldn't become obvious to the public until years later. In high school, she was a soccer player, and not just casually. Jolene went on to play as a midfielder for the SMU Huskies at St. Mary's University in Halifax, competing at a university level while simultaneously pursuing a Bachelor of Commerce in Finance. She also studied kinesiology alongside her commerce degree, which tells you something about the way she approached life. She wasn't the type to do one thing when she could do two. After graduating, she didn't land some high-profile finance job in a glass tower. She worked as a food and beverage supervisor at a golf resort in Centreville, and later as waitstaff at a pool hall in New Menaz. On paper, it looked like someone whose ambitions hadn't found their lane yet, but those who knew her understood she was simply waiting for the right opportunity, one that was worth actually building something around. What's easy to overlook is that Jolene came into Chad's world not as someone who needed direction, but as someone who already had a business education, a competitive mindset from years of sport, and a clear instinct for what makes something worth people's attention. She wasn't shaped by the show, she shaped the show, and that distinction matters a lot when you start looking at everything that came after. The question was never whether Jolene MacIntyre had what it took. It was just a matter of what she'd apply it to. The meeting that changed everything wasn't planned, and by most accounts it almost didn't happen at all. Chad Hiltz was parked outside a pool hall in New Menaz, on his way to a car show when Jolene and a friend walked out and noticed the car he was driving. It was the Green Goblin, one of Chad's most recognizable custom builds, and it was exactly the kind of thing that stopped people in their tracks. Jolene approached him, not the other way around. What's interesting is that according to Chad and Jolene themselves, speaking about it years later, Chad was far more immediately struck by her than she was by him. She was curious about the car. He was focused on something else entirely. It's a small detail, but it reframes the whole dynamic, because the version of Jolene that fans think they know, the one quietly supporting someone else's dream, isn't really how this story started. She walked towards something that caught her eye, and she made the first move. That said, Chad wasn't passive about what happened next. He spent the better part of 6 months sending her friendly messages before she agreed to meet him for coffee. 6 months. By the time they actually started dating in early 2017, he'd already made it clear this wasn't casual interest on his part. And once Jolene did let him in, things moved fast. By August 12, 2017, they were engaged. But somewhere in those early months of getting to know each other, something shifted for Jolene, beyond the relationship itself. She saw what Chad was doing in the shop, and immediately recognized that the rest of the world had absolutely no idea it existed. He was building things in a small town in Nova Scotia that would have genuinely stunned people at any major car show in the country, and almost no one outside of the local community knew his name. That realization is where the business story really begins. Not with a television deal, not with a viral moment, but with Jolene sitting with that gap between what Chad was capable of and how invisible it still was, and deciding she was going to do something about it. Before there was a television show, before there was a Discovery Channel deal, and before millions of people knew the name Bad Chad, there was a Bugatti. Or more accurately, there was the idea of one, and a promise Chad made to a woman he was determined to impress. Jolene had long admired Ralph Lauren's 1938 Bugatti Type 57 SC. It's one of the most iconic automobiles ever built, a pre-war masterpiece that Lauren acquired decades ago and which has been valued at around $40 million. It was never going to sit in a shop in Canning, Nova Scotia. But Chad, being exactly who he is, told Jolene he'd build her one anyway. Not a restoration, not a kit, a replica, constructed from scratch, using the same resourcefulness and raw ingenuity that defined everything he'd ever built. What happened next is where Jolene's business instincts took over. As Chad worked on the build, she started filming it. Not with professional equipment or any kind of production plan, just her phone and an understanding that what she was watching was genuinely remarkable. She began posting the footage online, sharing the process on a schedule, documenting everything from the fabrication of the doors to the construction of the control arms. She wasn't just capturing a car being built, she was capturing a talent that most of the world hadn't seen yet. The response told her everything she needed to know. People were captivated. One video alone, titled "Building the $40 million Bugatti for My Girlfriend," went on to be viewed well over 250,000 times. The comments weren't just enthusiastic, they were the kind of reaction that signals something real, an audience connecting with both the craft and the story behind it. A small-town builder making the impossible possible with basic tools and limitless creativity. That growing online audience eventually landed in front of the right eyes. Executives at Love Productions USA took notice, reached out, and the conversation that would become Bad Chad Customs began. None of it traces back to a pitch meeting or a talent scout. It traces back to Jolene pointing her phone at something she believed in and deciding the world deserved to see it. When Bad Chad Customs premiered on Discovery Channel on January 2, 2019, most viewers saw a show about an eccentric car builder with a gift for turning junk into jaw-dropping machines. What they didn't fully see was the infrastructure behind it, the person who had spent years building the audience, rebranding the business, negotiating the logistics, and setting the entire production up before a single camera rolled. That was Jolene, and her role went far deeper than her title of shop manager ever suggested. One of the first major decisions she made before the show even aired was a business one. Chad had been operating under the name Green Goblin Customs for years, but when the Discovery deal came through, a licensing conflict surfaced. The name Green Goblin had ties to Marvel Comics, home to one of Spider-Man's most recognizable villains, and that created a problem when it came to merchandise, international rights, and monetization. Jolene handled it. She moved quickly, rebranding the operation as Hiltz Auto Co., a name that centered the brand around Chad himself rather than a character they didn't own. It was a smart, clean pivot that positioned them for long-term growth beyond the show. Beyond the rebrand, Jolene was the one who found the clients featured in each build, coordinated with local businesses used during filming, managed the budgets and deadlines that drove the tension viewers saw on screen, and controlled the shop's social media presence throughout both seasons. Chad has never been shy about acknowledging what that contribution meant. In his own words, speaking to AutoWise, he put it plainly, "She's smarter than he is. He can build a car, and that's exactly why they teamed up." What that partnership created on screen was compelling television, but what it created off-screen was something more durable, a real business with a growing international audience, a merchandise operation, and a YouTube channel that continued building long after Discovery's cameras packed up and left Nova Scotia. The show may have put Chad's name on the map, but it was Jolene who drew the map in the first place, and who made sure the business existed independently of whatever a television network decided to do next. For as long as Bad Chad Customs was on the air, a certain set of questions kept circulating in the comments. Why did the cars Chad supposedly built for customers keep showing up on the shop's own social media? Why did builds that were presented as commission jobs seem to stay in Chad's possession long after the episodes aired? And if the clients were real, why did none of them ever seem to surface online talking about their car? Jolene answered all of it. In a 2023 video shared across their social media, she pulled back the curtain in a way that was unusually candid for someone still actively running the brand the show had built. She described Bad Chad Customs plainly as a formulated product, her words meaning it operated the way most reality television operates, with a production structure that shaped the narrative well before filming ever began. One of the most revealing details she confirmed was about the cars themselves. Chad's contract with Discovery stipulated that every vehicle built during the show's 2 seasons would remain with him. The client's viewers watched commissioning builds and driving away at the end of each episode were part of the show's format. The builds were real, the craftsmanship was genuine, But the transactional element audiences were meant to believe in was constructed for television. Those cars never left Hiltz Auto coasts, which is exactly why fans kept spotting them on the shop's YouTube channel and social media years after the episodes had aired. She also confirmed that Discovery funded the shop renovations viewers saw during the series. The upgraded workspace that appeared on screen wasn't something Chad and Jolene built themselves in the lead-up to filming. The network paid for it as part of the production. It was another layer of the show's construction that had gone unaddressed publicly until Jolene chose to address it herself. What made the reveal land the way it did wasn't shock value. Most viewers who followed the show closely had already pieced together that something didn't add up. What mattered was that Jolene said it out loud, on their own platform without any apparent pressure to do so. For a fan base that had spent years asking questions, it was the confirmation they'd been waiting for. By the time most couples have been engaged for a year, there's usually some movement toward an actual wedding, a venue, a date, a conversation that makes it onto social media. Chad and Jolene got engaged on August 12, 2017, and as of 2025, none of that has materialized publicly. 8 years, no aisle, no announcement, and for a couple who documented the Bugatti build on social media, shared the engagement photo with their audience, and built an entire television career around letting cameras into their lives, that silence has been loud enough for fans to notice. It's one of the most consistent questions that surfaces in their comments. Not about the cars, not about the show, but about the wedding that was promised and never came. Jolene herself once said she wanted the Bugatti replica Chad built her to be their wedding car. That car has been finished for years. It has appeared in content at shows and across their social media channels. The wedding it was supposedly built to lead never followed. What's important to be clear about is this: there is no confirmed reason why. Nothing verified. No statement from either Chad or Jolene addressing the delay directly. No public falling out or reported trouble in the relationship. Every available indication points to them still being together, still running Hiltz Auto Co. side by side, and still appearing in each other's content. The relationship, by all observable measures, remains intact. But that gap between the engagement and the present is something fans have filled with their own theories, and it's not hard to understand why. Chad came into the relationship with a complicated personal history. He became a father at 16, was married and divorced twice before meeting Jolene, and had a third significant relationship that also ended before she came into the picture. For some viewers, that history makes the prolonged engagement feel like more than logistics. The honest answer is that nobody outside of that relationship actually knows what the delay means. What is known is that Jolene MacIntyre has been building a life and a business with Chad Hiltz for nearly a decade, engaged but not married, visible but not fully readable, and somehow that ambiguity has only made people more invested in both of them. The story of Bad Chad Customs was never really about the cars. It was about a woman from a small Nova Scotia town who looked at an invisible talent and decided the world needed to see it, then built the machine that made that happen. Jolene MacIntyre didn't stumble into this. She engineered it, from the first video she filmed on her phone, to the Discovery deal, the rebrand, and everything that followed. The show is gone. The wedding hasn't happened. And the questions fans have been asking for years finally got some answers, not from a tabloid, not from a leaked document, but from Jolene herself, on her own platform, on her own terms. What she confirmed wasn't shocking, it was simply honest. And after years of watching a carefully produced version of their lives, honesty turned out to be the most interesting thing she could offer. The cameras may be gone, she's still here.